All right, are we live? Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Welcome to Friday night services. Pleasure to be with you on Zoom and in the room. Rabbi Ross is taking a Shabbat off this weekend, so you're stuck with me. And we're going to do services a little different tonight. We have something called the learner service, and we do that in different ways, but what it means is really kind of pausing at certain spots in the service to take a little time to look at how does this service really work? What's this prayer mean? Where does it come from maybe? And so we'll do a little bit tonight at different places during the liturgy just to explore a little bit more the meaning of prayer and a little bit of the history of the Shabbat service. But we're going to start, as we always do, with the, no, we're not going to light the candles quite yet. We're going to sing Yedid Nefesh first on page 10. Yedid Nefesh al v'rachaman, Yedid Nefesh al v'rachaman, Meshul chavdecha el retzonecha, Meshul chavdecha yadadadai el retzonecha. Yorutz avdecha Yishtachave yadadai yadadadai el mulehadarecha. And if you have candles at home, I invite you to get ready and light them so we can join together in the blessing. Even though I cannot hear you, you know you're chanting the blessing. And so perhaps you can see each other's candles on the Zoom screen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat Shalom again, and we will also join together in Kiddush. If you have a Kiddush cup handy with some juice or some wine, we'll join together on page 5. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodesho me'ahava uv'ratzon hinchilanu zikaron l'masei v'reishit ki hu yom techila l'mikrei kodesh zecher litziat Mitzrayim ki vanu bacharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim v'shabbat kodshecha b'yahava uv'ratzon hinchatanu Baruch atah Adonai, Mekadesh HaShabbat. On page 9. There are days when we seek things for ourselves and measure failure by what we do not gain. On Shabbat, we seek not to acquire, but to share. There are days when we exploit nature as if it were a horn of plenty that can never be exhausted. On Shabbat, we stand in wonder before the mystery of creation. There are days when we act as if we cared nothing for the rights of others. On Shabbat, we remember that justice is our duty and a better world our goal. So we embrace Shabbat, day of rest, day of wonder, and day of peace. So let me pause for a moment here and talk just a little bit about this beginning part of the service, which is called Kabbalat Shabbat. Kabbalat means to receive, to welcome, to accept. And really the part that we just did, the lighting of candles and Kiddush, is something that originally is done in the home. And in many liberal or Reform synagogues, it was made part of the service because not everybody was able to do it at home. But at this point, we'd start the part of the service that gets us ready to receive Shabbat. Now, usually here at West End, we jump right to L'Chadodi. But before L'Chadodi, there is a series of psalms, 6 psalms. So if you think about the number 6, what comes to mind, perhaps? 6 days of the week before we get to Shabbat, right? And that's exactly part of the mystical meaning behind those psalms. The idea, there is a psalm for each day of the week. So we kind of go back and start last Sunday. And with each psalm, reflect on what our week has been. And let go maybe of stuff. And so by the time we get to Psalm number 6 for Friday, we are really ready to welcome Shabbat. And at that point, it is that we sing L'Chadodi. Let's go, my friend, Likrat Kala, towards the bride. Pnei Shabbat Nekabela, let us welcome the Shabbat. And all of this, the idea of the 6 psalms, L'Chadodi, and then there are 2 more psalms after, comes from a time when Jewish mysticism was very, very, I'd say, in its glory times, 16th century, 1600s Sefat. And L'Chadodi was written by one of the main rabbis and teachers, Isaac Luria, of that time, and was his way of creating this beautiful liturgical prayer, liturgical poem, really, for the welcoming of Shabbat. We could spend a week just studying the text of L'Chadodi because there's so many hidden layers and meanings, but we're not going to do that tonight. For now, I would invite you all on Zoom and in this sanctuary just to take a minute and do a quick review of your week starting at last Sunday. Just maybe think if there is something from last Sunday that you can remember. Might have been something really positive, maybe something not so great. And then you move on to last Monday. What was last Monday? Some of us were here last Monday because it was Shavuot. And then on Tuesday, can you remember anything about Tuesday? Anything that you might like to leave behind before we enter Shabbat? And how about Wednesday? Anything from Wednesday? And Thursday, which is yesterday. And lastly, today, Friday. I think for me it's the rush hour traffic driving out here. It's a wonderful thing to just kind of exhale and let it slide off my back. I'll take another breath and exhale, and with that, imagine us in Safat in the north of Israel during peaceful times, going out into the field as the sun is close to setting to welcome the Shabbat. The Chadodi is on page 20. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, ishmianu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad u'shemo echad, l'shem u'letiferet v'litila. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala, pnei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nei lecha, ki mekor habracha, merosh mikedem nesucha, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. התעוררי, כי באורך כל מי אורי, שיר דברי, כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. בואי ושלום עטרת בלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. And we go to another wonderful poem, Shalom Aleichem, on page 24. Also written probably under the influence of a mystical, Kabbalistic style of thinking. And as it says in the little comments on the bottom of the page in Mishkan Tefillah, There's actually some very interesting material there if you are ever letting your eyes wander, right? So it alludes to a passage in the Talmud which states that two angels accompany each person home from the synagogue. So it's another wonderful way to have that sense of company as we welcome in Shabbat. And the 4 verses of Shalom Aleichem, right? We welcome, we say, come on in, bless us, and then go back out. So it's the arc of Shabbat. Welcoming in Shabbat, letting go Shabbat, and in between, the sense of blessing. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Malachem Shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu ni l'shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Teitchem l'shalom, Malachei Shalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malchei HaMelachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Page 26, the Chatzi Kaddish, or the reading Kaddish, the beginning of the actual evening service. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabba, be'alma divrei chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayeichon v'yomeichon, u'v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'gala, ba'gala, u'v'zman kariv, v'imru, Amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach, le'alam u'le'alamei alamaya, yitbarach. Yitbarach v'yishtabach, v'yitbar v'yitomam v'yitnaseh, v'yithadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal, shemei dekurusha b'richu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiran me'alma, v'himeru, Amen. If you're able to, you may rise for the Baruch Hu. Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai HaMevorach, Leolam Evad. On page 30, the translation of the first of 2 blessings before the Shema, the blessing about the evening. Blessed are you, Adonai, our God, ruler of the universe, who speaks the evening into being, skillfully opens the gates, thoughtfully alters the time and changes the seasons, and arranges the stars in their heavenly courses according to plan. You are creator of day and night, rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light, transforming day into night and distinguishing one from the other. Adonai Tsevaot is your name. Ever-living God, may you reign continually over us into eternity. Blessed are you, Adonai, who brings on the evening. Baruch atah Adonai, Hamariv Haravim. So here we are in the part of the service in Hebrew that's called Ma'ariv or Arvit, which means the evening service. And it shares very common parts with the morning service. The Baruch Hu, you know, right? The Shema, the Ve'ahavta. They're both in the evening and in the morning. They're pretty much in every service, actually. But the contents of some of those blessings changes a little. So in the evening, right, the rabbis always found it important that we don't take things for granted. So the blessing that we just read, the Ma'ariv Aravim, talks about creation and the change of time, right? Rolling light away from darkness and darkness from light. Acknowledging this miraculous thing of the cycle of day and night that continually happens. So blessings, in a way, I think are reminders for us to not take things for granted and kind of marvel at the miracle of it all. So in the evening, we praise the evening. In the morning, Yotzer HaMeorot, in the same place in the service, we acknowledge the creator of lights, right, in all the various forms. Again, the miracle of light coming in the morning, darkness descending in the evening. And then before we get to the Shema, there is a blessing about love, both before and after. Because first we sing together Ahavat Olam, which talks about God loving us. And then we say the Shema, and then we recite together Ve'ahavta, which talks about us loving God, right? So it's sort of the bookends and a two-way relationships, right? It's not just coming one way, it has to go both ways. Ahavat Olam is acknowledging the love that God offers us. And Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha is reminding us that we shall love Adonai our God. It's a real beautiful bookending on both sides of the Shema to establish and affirm that relationship. Sit with that for a moment. What does it mean to be loved and to love in this particular context? And it's similar in the morning. Ahava Rabbah is also a prayer that talks about God's love for us, and then following the Shema, of course, we recite the Ve'ahavta, telling us to love God right back. So Ahavat Olam is on page 32. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael. 1 second. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael. I'm going to have to get rid of that tickle before I go on. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amecha Ahavta Amecha ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת, אותנו לימדת. על כן, אדוני אלוהינו, בשוכבנו ובקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך, ונשמח בדברי תורתך, ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד, כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה, נגי יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת, page 36. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך, ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם. On the facing page, on page 37, there is quite an interpretive translation of the Ve'ahavta, which I actually like a lot, because I always feel it brings it into everyday life. So I want to read that with you. On page 37, love your God with every heartbeat, with every breath, with every conscious act. Keep in mind the words I command you today. Teach them to your children. Talk about them at work, whether you are tired or you are rested. Let them guide the work of your hands. Keep them in the forefront of your vision. Do not leave them at the doorway of your house or outside your gate. They are reminders to do all of my mitzvot, so that you can be holy for God. I am Adonai, your God. I led you out of Egypt to become your God. I am Adonai, your God. Michamocha on page 40. kamocha bailim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar bakodesh, norat hilot osefele. Malchutecha ralvanecha, bokei hayam lifnei Moshe uMiriam, Zeili anu v'hameru, Adonai yimloch leolam v'ad. V'nehemar, ki fada Adonai et Yaakov, u'ge'alo miyad chazak mimenu. Baruch atah Adonai, Gal Yisrael. Praised are you, Adonai, for redeeming Israel. Mi chamocha. Chanted it actually a couple of weeks ago. Well, it's already a while back, when we did the Song of the Sea. Mi chamocha is one of the many texts in our Siddur that comes straight out of Torah. Just like Ve'ahavta and the Shema that we just chanted. Those come straight out of Torah, just like the next thing we will chant in a minute or so, V'shamru. What we have in the prayer book is this kind of interesting collection of biblical texts from the Torah, interwoven with rabbinical writing, kind of, weaving texts together, and liturgical poetry. For example, the Chadodi that we sang, or Shalom Aleichem, or Adon Olam, those are all liturgical poems. So it's kind of an interesting collection if you think about it. We have biblical text, we have rabbinical prose and writing, and we have liturgical poetry from pretty much, across the ages. And then in this prayer book that we use, Mishkan Tfilah, we have added to that modern commentary and contemporary poetry and contemporary interpretive translations. And so the way the book is really designed for us is to let our eyes wander sometimes and to go to the other side of the page and look at a piece of poetry that might connect to the prayer, or the bottom of the page, and we kind of learn a new insight. I always encourage people that it's okay if you get lost. Really okay. If you find something that speaks to you, stay with it. That's why this book is designed in this way. And then you'll catch up with us again. So Mi Chamocha is taken from the portion that has the Song of the Sea, that moment where the Israelites have crossed, escaped the Egyptians, and are celebrating their redemption. And it is called the blessing of Geulah, of redemption. And it's one of the places where the melodies change all the time. You may have noticed that, right? It's one of the places where cantors hide little musical hints when there is a holiday coming up, for example, or a special occasion. You might actually hear a motif in the music like, that reminds me of something. And then it dawns on you, oh yeah, that's a Passover melody or a Hanukkah tune. This is the place in the service where cantors kind of sneak that in. And we also have many, many different compositions for Mi Chamocha, many of them expressing kind of the joy and jubilation at that moment standing at the sea. And so before we get to the Amidah, the central prayer part, we're going to chant together V'shamru, which is another quote from the Torah about the Shabbat, taken straight from the book of Exodus. And that reminds us that we are meant to keep the Shabbat, observing it throughout the ages. sign for all time between God and the people of Israel. And again, V'shamru has many, many, many melodies. One could chant it to biblical cantillation or sing it to any number of tunes. I'm going to pick one tonight. Let's see which one comes out first. V'shameru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם ביני ובני ישראל ביני ובני ישראל אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם ברית עולם. And once we have acknowledged that reminder about Shabbat, we transition into the tefillah or the Amidah, the standing prayer. And I invite you to rise if you are able to on page 46. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha Adonai open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu ve'imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, ve'Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, ve'Elohei Leah, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים, וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה. אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיה כל הטרף להושיע, מוריד הטל. מכלכל חיים בחסד, מחיה הכל ברחמים רבים, סומך נופלים ורופא חולים, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר, מי כמוך בעל גבורות, ומדור מלוך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות הכל. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיי הכל. On page 53, days pass and the years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. God, fill our eyes with seeing and our minds with knowing. Let there be moments when your presence, like lightning, illumines the darkness in which we walk. Help us to see wherever we gaze that the bush burns unconsumed. And we, clay touched by God, will reach out for holiness and exclaim in wonder, how filled with awe is this place, and we did not know it. Baruch atah Adonai, ha'el ha'kadosh. Blessed are you, Adonai, holy God. This is the place in our service. We skip some of the middle of the Amidah and we go to the concept of modim, thanksgiving, thankfulness, gratitude. That's what this blessing is about, and that's why we take a moment to invite you all in the chat or out here in the sanctuary to share perhaps something you are grateful for this Shabbat. Now, this is not the time where we talk about illness or losses, but this is the time when we express gratitude for the things that are good. Anybody here have anything to share that is good? Sherry.
I just spent the week with my grandchildren.
Now that is a wonderful thing to be grateful for. Jay.
I'm happy about my cats, number one, like my children, some are better. My daughter so far is coming on the end of next week to spend a few days. She got permission now. Before they said if you leave, you take off for 14 days, you're fired. Because usually every year for my birthday in September, she never missed one. And this year, she's coming up now.
Wonderful. So you have some family time coming, which is great.
I'm trying to get my tooth organized for another week. So it was 5 weeks, medication, and that's it.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And I know that we have people putting in the chat things that they're grateful for. Liv.
Yeah, I am grateful for you, Cantor Wolf, and for my wonderful niece, Abigail, who's turning 2 tomorrow, 2 years old. I also, if it's okay with you, Cantor Wolf, would love to relay to those in the sanctuary the things that people would want to say at home.
Sure.
By repeating what they say as they say it to me. Let's see. If anyone would like to raise their hands, they can do so, and I'll
Well, they put it in the chat. If they can put it in the chat, that would be good.
I'm just going to say what they say over themselves, so that you can hear it. Arthur said in chat already, traditional melodies. He's grateful for that. Richard Lipsman said, grateful for the day when Shabbat, eldest granddaughter, made National Junior Honor Roll as high school junior.
Mazel tov.
National Honor Roll, yeah, mazel tov. We are thinking of those who have blessings.
Well, and I'm grateful for Liv, who just brought me some water, because I keep having these tickles. Thank you for that. And for Liv and Thomas, as always, for sitting here and making all the technology happen. We really appreciate it. And with that, I invite you to just take a few moments of private prayer or exploring something that's on the pages of the book, whichever makes the most sense to you. shalom bimromav, yaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. You may notice there are some extra words there. Very important words that were added in this prayer book. Many changes were made in this more contemporary prayer book. We add in the mothers. We add in feminine versions, feminine forms of the verb so that both men and women can feel represented in the liturgy. And in this particular phrase, Oseh shalom bimromav, may the one who makes peace up on high, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, may he make peace over us, ve'al kol Yisrael, and over all of Israel. And then the additional words, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. And that means for all the inhabitants of the earth. And so we want to really acknowledge that we pray for peace, not just for ourselves, not just for our community, but really globally. And I think especially these days, it's important to realize that unless there is peace on all sides, there is no peace. So let's sing this again and really think about these extra words that we put in, Va'al kol yoshvei tevel, for all the inhabitants of the earth. And the words are on page 62 at the bottom, right? Oseh shalom bimromav, uyaseh shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel, ve'imru, amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol yoshvei tevel. At this time, we turn to page 253, and we focus our intentions and our thoughts and prayers on those in our community who are in need of healing. We have the following names on our list: Joan Sorgan, Don Sorgan, Whitney Klein, Nadine Miller, Ted Miller, Seth Miller, Danielle Miller, Samantha Miller, Jordan Miller, Sherry Copeland, Scott Copeland, Fred Rosenfeld, Deanne Rosenfeld, Jack Leviton, Isabella Lagamba, Robin Dunn, Ron Druckman, Moses Powell, Margaret Powell, Yvette LaRochelle, Roberta Klein, Richard Grossman, Louis Allen, Audrey Hirsch, Barbara Kantrowitz, Stephen Nelson, Kathy Volpe, Marilyn Zaga, Michael Stewart, Tony Kippelman, Jay Kaplan, Jen Rubin, Robbie Huff, Mark Huff, Taylor Huff, Dan Cerulli, Welaine Cerulli, Letitia Cerulli, Fran Beam, Walter Beam, June Hess, Michelle Finley, Jay Hoffman, Dan and Lee Cerulli, Carl Lembo, Danny Rosillo, Jim Cecile, Loretta Umlas, Audrey Goodplan, Tessie Mikos, Blanche Tyson, Jeffrey Side, Monty Side, Sheldon Levine, Richard Galvin, Carrie Galvin, Matthew Kent, Danica Kent, Donna Longmoran, Christine Lerner, Ann Beckman, Jean Kaplan, Hillary Lease, Tina Cohen, Myra Levine, Marie Van Creer, and Kathy Goldsmith. Are there any additional names in the sanctuary that we need to mention out loud?
From chat, Dale Armentrout and Lynn Armentrout, Rocco Pisani.
We hold also in our prayers all of those who suffered injuries these past 2 weeks of violence in Israel and in many other places in the world, unfortunately, as well. All of those who are still suffering with COVID-19 and struggling to recover. And hold those all in our thoughts as we chant together Misha Berach, page 253. Misha Berach Avoteinu Mekor HaBracha Leimoteinu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Misha Berach Imoteinu Mekor HaBracha Lavoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. For the conclusion of our service, we turn to Aleinu on page 282. If you're able to, I invite you to rise. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו כגויי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ונאמר מאדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו 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 Please be seated for a moment. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. This Shabbat, we especially remember Joel Plavin. We remember all those who have died due to the coronavirus, and all those who have lost their lives due to the hostilities between Israel and Hamas over these last 2 weeks. We observed the yahrzeits this Shabbat of Joseph Cohen, Leo Durek, Annie F. Ellerstein, Percy Friedlander, Harry Goldstein, Anna Judelson, Anna Kissel, Dr. Arnold Coopersmith, Jani Krasov, Irving Lampert, Harold Lippman, Jill Mahalowitz, Elaine Markson, Ronnie Sylvain Postal, and Joseph Russo. Are there any additional names that you'd want to add? Then I invite us all to rise and recite together the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah. Be'alma divrach chirutei v'yamlich malchutei b'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala u'yizman kariv v'imru Amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam u'la'almei almaya יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי דקודשה בריחו לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה תוש בחתה ונחמתה דאמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. יהי שלמה רבה מן שמיה וחיים עלינו ועל כל ישראל יאמרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, to all of Israel and all of humankind, and let us say amen. Shabbat Shalom again. Sherry, do we have any announcements?
Do we have Torah study tomorrow?
Rabbi is off this weekend, so no Torah study.
There is Hebrew school on Sunday, I think.
Hebrew school on Sunday and Shabbat services next Friday. And I thought we'd end with kind of a contemporary Israeli song. You may know it, Ani ve'ata. It's kind of a remember that we're all in this together. And that even though it's tough to change the world, we try it anyway. We don't necessarily have to finish it, but we at least are going to start it together. It's on page 348. 348. Ani ve'ata. You and I will change the world. Ani ve'ata neshana et ha'olam. Ani ve'ata az yavo kvar kulam. Amru et ze kodem lefanai ze lo meshana. Ani ve'ata neshana et ha'olam. Ani ve'ata ננסה מההתחלה. יהיה לנו רע, אין דבר זה לא נורא. השם לפניי, זה לא משנה. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. אני ואתה נשנה את העולם. שבת שלום.